So the first thing I'm going to do is create some global variables. So I'll go to my equations and I'll create a variable called ribs, and I will set that equal to 4, and then I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to call it no underscore of underscore holes, number of holes, and I'm going to make this equal to the number of ribs. Now maybe we want to do the number of ribs divided by 2 or some other equation, but this is what I want right now. I want those to be equivalent, and then I'm going to put in angle of holes, and I'm going to set that to the global variable ribs, and actually I want to put that 360 divided by the number of ribs. And so if I have 4 ribs, the holes will be 90 degrees apart. And then I'll start a new sketch on the front plane, and I'm going to do a 2-point rectangle going from the origin up. I'll change these 3 lines to construction, and I'll put some dimensions on here. So the diametral dimension from here to here as 1.8, and for the height of this I'll do that as 1.75. I'll then draw a line coming out here horizontally. I'll come up, I'll come over, and I'll go up at an angle and back over to here. I'll dimension the height of this as 0.25, and I'll dimension the diameter from here to the center line as 6 inches. And I'm going to dimension from this point over to the center line, and I'll do that a dimension of 2.75. Now that's a change from the original, so that might not be right. The original was 2.75 down here over to the center line. And I will put, I want a 3-degree taper angle on here, so I'll do a total angle of 87 degrees. That'll give me that 3-degree taper. I'm going to mirror these 2 lines to the other side, so I'm going to do mirror. And you might not need to do this step, but I just prefer to do it this way. I'll change those 2 lines to construction, and I'm going to draw my line in here that will be my rib. So I'll draw a line from here to here. I'll dimension that distance from here down to here as 0.25. Make sure I get that vertical distance. And I'll dimension this distance from here to here also as 0.25. Okay. Now I will finish this sketch, and I'm going to do a new sketch on the top plane, and I'll draw a circle. We'll dimension that 4.5, and I will draw a construction line going from the origin over horizontally, and I will then do another construction line from this point right here over to here. Let me change those to construction lines. And I'll dimension the angle from this line to this line, and I'll set that to be equal to the global variable angle of holes. And I see that I have that at 90, and I really intended that to be 45. So I'll go back to my equations, and I will edit my equations, and let's change this to 180. Okay, so let's go back and edit that sketch. And so now I have that at where I intended for it to be. I'll draw a circle here for the hole, and we'll dimension that 0.375. I might want to show that to the 3 decimal places, so let me go ahead and change that so that we can keep track of. And I'll finish that sketch, and I'm going to roll up my roll up bar over sketch number 2 to hide it for a minute, and I'll click on sketch 1. I'll do revolve, and I'm going to revolve it about this line, and I want to revolve this area. Make sure I turn off thin features, and so there is my revolution. I will make that sketch visible again, and so I'll do show, and I will select this line, and I'll do rib, and I want only that line, so I'll go to my selected contours and click only that line. I want to go in perpendicular to the sketch plane and or parallel to the sketch plane, and I want it to be 0.25 for the thickness, and I'll tell it an angle of 3 degrees, and we'll say OK to that. Alright, I can hide sketch number 1, and I'll go to sketch number 2, and I will extrude sketch 2. Tell it to go through all, and say OK to that. Now, if I'm always going to have the number of ribs equal to the number of holes, I could do this as one pattern. But let's assume that we might do these separately, different number of ribs. And so I'll do a circular pattern, and I will select the rib, and then I want to go about the center of the part, and for the number of copies I want that to be equal to the global variable ribs. Okay, and then I'll do a second pattern for the holes. Now, we could have included the holes in the first pattern if we were always going to have the same number of holes as we did ribs, and I'll select that around the center of the part, and I'll set that equal to the global variable number of holes. Alright, now let's say that we might want to change the number of holes or the number of ribs. We could go into our equations, or we can right click on the annotations folder and tell it to show feature dimensions, and so we see the dimensions of our features, and we see a circular pattern here, and there's also a circular pattern down here, and so number of instances 4, and if I put my mouse over that, it tells me that that circular pattern, if I can get this, is the second circular pattern. So this is the first circular pattern, and somewhere in here there's a number on there. So here's the number of instances for that circular pattern. I will change that to 6 copies, and I will click rebuild, and we see that it changes to 6 holes and to 6 ribs. If I change that to 12, and I'll rebuild it, and if I change that back to 4, I'll just rebuild it right here. So we can put in whatever number of ribs and holes that we want into our global variable. If I come over here and I check my global variable, we see that it's listed over here.